yeah, you can't fake skateboarding. You could fake a bunch of stuff or talk about a bunch of stuff on a rap song or a rock song or a metal song, but yeah, skateboarding, there's no Pro Tools.
In the late 1970s in Venice, California, teenagers took their surfboards curbside and began experimenting in the streets with small wooden boards and clay wheels. At the same time, on the opposite side of the country, in the burned-out ghettos of the Bronx, street kids began moving away from the gangs and violence that plagued New York City, gravitating instead towards a new street culture of art, music, and dance. It would take years, but the passion of a few would drive these two subcultures together to form an entirely new one, a new movement created by kids that would forever change the face of popular culture, a movement that would find itself embedded on every corner in every city across the globe. In the mid-70s, engulfed by an urban metropolis, a graffiti writer from the Upper West Side emerged.
There's a guy named Mark Edmonds who was a graffiti writer who wrote Ali. And he was the ringleader of a gang of real little kids who all grew up on the Upper West Side of New York and who all skateboarded and all wrote graffiti.
New York was on the edge. It was as edgy as you could possibly imagine. It was like pre-punk rock, and it was the mid-70s. We were an economic disaster. The blackout was a couple years away, and things were falling apart right around us.
Everybody had a pilot, a mini-wide, a uni-wide. Everybody was writing graffiti.
Basically, all these kids did was go and skateboard, rip apart construction sites, build little quarter pipes, and then skate around the city and do all their tags.
Despite skateboarding's prevalence in mainstream culture today, at its roots, skateboarding started as a transportation tool for a small group of New York City street kids.
Growing up in New York or New Jersey, you had to seek it out really hard. You know, you had to like find and dig.
I'd walk home through Washington Square Park sometimes, and I'd see like some long-haired weirdo dude skateboarding around. And I'd go to Central Park and see it too. And it started to kind of get more and more popular. You'd see it more and more. And this is literally when dudes had clay wheels still.
Even if you heard the sound of someone skateboarding, you would skate for blocks and blocks trying to chase the sound. You know, it ends up being a guy pushing a shopping cart or something like that. But there was so few people around doing it that we all linked together.
There were rats and roaches everywhere, and it was just, you know, it was really wild, like it was reckless.
Rivalry, there was clannish.
You got people like, you know, especially black skateboarders, and they're like, some kids are like, yo, why are you doing that white boy stuff? And it wasn't even that. They were just like, what is that? It had nothing to do with like, you know, any sort of race. They were just like, what are you doing, kid?
In New York City, you were a complete outsider. You know, you were on some weird shit.
Kids who lived in West Bedford, which was near IS-70, my friend Carl and a bunch of other kids, they had a little quarter pipe, and we'd skate the quarter pipe up against the wall and have a sticker contest. This is when we first started to actually hit vert.
New York has always been known for its cultural diversity, and as the 1980s approached, people of all races came together for New York City's infamous block parties.
We're from what was a very cohesive downtown scene that incorporated skateboarding, incorporated nightlife, incorporated DJs and going out and parties, and really an environment of hanging out with each other.
Skateboarding was the vehicle in which a lot of kids that were into all these different subcultures moved around the city to experience it.
In certain neighborhoods, they would literally, you know, shut the block down and, you know, set up the barbecue and, you know, everybody playing and cooking and stuff like that.
If there were jams, like the notorious like Jam in the Park, the sound system getting run out of a light post, There were a lot of those, a lot of block parties.
You know, the skateboarders, when they were done skateboarding, they wanted to get some music on. The graffiti artists did the same. And if they were tired bombing, they wanted to get down here some music. Music, everybody loves music.
Basketball courts or the baseball fields, you know, they would set up the whole setup and cats would perform and DJ and stuff like that.
I would just be skating, so I got to hear a lot of really dope DJs.
You had rich kids from the Upper East Side interacting with Puerto Rican kids from the Lower East Side, interacting with black kids from Brooklyn. And it was a special cultural soup.
With the late 70s punk rock movement flooding New York's subculture, it was a natural fit for rebellious skate kids to embrace the style and music of the underground punk scene.
The punk rock thing started happening a little bit. And I remember my friend Raul and this kid Jesse got kind of new waved out, and Puppet too.
Punk look was what was really going on, and we could all relate to each other because we were all outcasts.
Punk rock was synonymous with skateboarding at that time. Pretty much like the New York City hardcore was synonymous to me from what I saw with skateboarding.
It was much more about Doc Martens than it was about Adidas.
I only listened to punk rock because I would read it in Thrasher magazine, and that's what they told me. I mean, I had to listen to.
It was kind of like, fuck the world, whatever. We hate the police, we hate authority. All that type of stuff is what I was into.
The Clash made Clash City Rockers or Magnificent Seven.
Futura 2000 is in the Radio Clash video. You know, the whole video is about him stealing paint and writing graffiti.
And then Blondie made Rapture. The fact that Fab Five Freddy's even mentioned in Rapture. For me, it's a hip-hop record because I heard it on Mr. Magic's Rap Attack.
From the angry hip-hopper point of view, it was synonymous with punk rock.
Hip-hop traditionally was punk music for kids that were into doing their own thing, doing a very individual thing where they could innovate and show their own style. Hip-hop made as much sense as, you know, punk.
I remember meeting Doze, and Doze was into skating too. And he was in Rocksteady crew, but he skated. And slowly but surely, we became more and more into being b-boys. So we're skating, but we're like skater b-boys kind of.
With the emergence of hip-hop, skaters found a new sound to represent the urban landscape, one that better represented their culture.
Somewhere around that time, I started to hear Eric B. and Rakim, Public Enemy, of course KRS-One and BDP. I mean, you know, I didn't know what the hell the bridge was, but I knew the bridge was over at that point.
We're on the same corner. You know, we're asking someone to get off that block so we can skate the block. We all had little ciphers when we grew up, like rapping to see how long you can go.
All of a sudden, Run DMC came out, and it was like it changed everything. We're like, oh shit, a group that kind of dresses like dudes on the street. They don't look like a broke P-Funk. And we related to that, like way more than Melly Mel and the like broke P-Funk look.
Skateboarding is skateboarding, right? Wrong. If you're a city dweller, skating takes on certain elements you may not find elsewhere. Police harassment around the clock, crowds, and traffic. But all this just adds to your creativity. And if you look at it right, even New York is really a skate park.
It's a way of being creative. It's a way of expressing yourself. And I really don't know any other sport that's quite the same, you know?
It may surprise some people, but skaters in New York say they're much more easygoing than their counterparts in California.
In the West, it seems it's a lot of too competition-minded, like win, lose, like it's like that there. Here, it's more like friendly, it's for fun, more or less.
There, they worry too much about fashion, what their clothes look like, how their hair is going to be combed that day. But if they got the right shoes on,
they don't know what it's like to go skate in the middle of snow or like go get chased by bums in a hood. They don't know that.
New York skaters found hip-hop to be the anthem they were searching for. While the skateboard industry continued to embrace punk rock, the skaters emerging from New York were better represented by hip-hop.
Punk music totally faded away. To me, the feeling that I got and the rhythm that came from the beats of hip-hop music felt so much to me like the clack, clack, clack of skating down a sidewalk and hitting a bench, or, you know, jumping a little hip or whatever, you know. It just all seemed to flow together.
And it was just this gritty, you know, it's about the music. The music got you hyped, you know, the graffiti got you pumped, you know, you're doing art, and it was just like, that was what skateboarding was on the East Coast. It wasn't nice, it was dirty.
That was synonymous with living in New York, was your hip hop or whatever. It wasn't a premeditated kind of like marketing ploy if you have it. That wasn't the deal at all.
Street culture that was happening, hip hop was growing and becoming widespread and known throughout the world. Skateboarding was not, but our affiliation with hip hop, we were very inspired by what was being said.
By 1986, New York City was home to dozens of skaters. But with Skate magazine showcasing nothing but punk rock, these kids would go unrepresented until one photo would begin a shift.
The first skater that I saw actually putting a stamp on it that I looked up to was Natas Kaupas. It sticks out like the Empire State Building, that photograph of him doing a melancholy at the Venice hip, and it blew my mind. I was like, one of my favorite skateboarders is rocking a Public Enemy shirt.
We went and saw Public Enemy, and we were super psyched on it. We got concert tees and stickers and stuff from the Palladium.
I remember me and Natas were like, yeah, we're gonna skate to BE, that's gonna be sick, you know?
I just thought then it was like a change because they were the first people to be like, we skate, we're pro, and we like hip hop.
You know, no one skated to hip hop in contests. It just didn't happen.
All these dudes, like, first waving that hip hop flag, I was like, you know what? We ain't screwed up over here, and I don't gotta listen to that whack, bang your head music or whatever. Like, I could play this at the contest.
To me, they were like the greatest band to skate to. Like, I loved skating to the second Public Enemy record. That was just like pure aggression. And they kind of like, before rock rap was invented, had the energy of rock and roll within hip hop, and I think that related to a lot of skaters, whether they know it or not, you know?
With hip-hop culture on the rise, kids began congregating in Washington Square Park.
Washington Square Park was a huge catalyst for both hip-hop and skateboarding.
We'd all meet there, congregate there, and skate all the time after school.
Washington Square Park was like a cesspool of beauty.
I think the park was like safe zone, because it was just, I don't know, it was almost felt like a weird downtown commune where you'd have, you know, BMXers, skaters, skinheads.
There was everything there. Musicians, squatters, skaters, hippies, skinheads, what have you. And the beautiful part about this cesspool was that everyone got along.
Basically, every Saturday and Sunday, every kid in the city from all 5 boroughs was going to Washington Square Park, and you'd see circles of people emceeing and freestyling or battling, and kids breakdancing.
Hip-hop is obviously a very big influence in all of our lives growing up, especially here in New York. But it is undeniably a big influence in street culture.
Why did hip-hop start? You had all these kids on the street not knowing what to do with themselves. So they started, instead of getting into trouble, they started, you know, listening to these loud beatboxes and dancing in the street.
It wasn't like, boom, all of a sudden it's here. It was just something that just sort of spawned from people hanging out.
It's a soundtrack to a lot of us urban kids' life, like, you know what I mean?
Jungle Brothers, Tribe, De La.
Hip-hop was starting to take over the culture, and it became the soundtrack to what we're all doing.
It went hand in hand, because you played music, either you were dancing, b-boying, or you skated and you were amped and you were doing like little tricks, wall rides, or like some kind of boneless off of a car, you know, but it was because of the sound from the radio that was playing got you amped to do these things, and it was just like soap and water.
The skateboard community has already said with a loud and clear voice, we are part of the hip hop community.
Regardless if it was 1986 or if it's 1996, for you to be listening to hip hop in your Walkman or on your fucking boombox at your skate spot is just like, it's organic. It's not like it's, you know, it's expected maybe, say, if you're fucking from LA and you listen to the Descendants or fucking Butthole Surface. Like, that's just a given, just like listening to hip hop in New York City being a skateboarder is a fucking given.
In the 1970s, when skateboarding was almost an exclusively white activity, a black couple from New Jersey embraced their son's passion, and in the process, set into motion the East Coast's first black pro skaters.
Ooh, ha! Fuck y'all niggas, ah!
We didn't know anything about skateboards. And just out of a clear blue sky, he picked up on it.
I was sort of like the outcast, so not that close with most family members, but you know, I was always about doing my thing.
I remember Rodney, my godbrother, skating.
Anything Rodney was into, Chris was into.
My parents had gotten divorced, so it's just my mom, and she worked all the time, so I was like, fuck that, I'm staying with this family because I have like brothers and sisters and like skateboards and all this cool stuff, you know? So I wound up just staying with Rodney for like years.
And he was like ours. He was,
yeah, he's my baby.
Most people thought he was ours.
I had a quarter pipe in my backyard, which was connected to a basketball court, and then we built this little makeshift roll-in, and that's what we had. And I had that in the backyard and moved my way up to having a half pipe.
I worked at a lumber yard, and I had access to trucks, flatbed trucks. So Rodney asked me one day, he said, Dad, you think I could have a ramp in the yard? I thought it was, you know, a little ramp. Each week, they would add another foot to this thing. It had to be up to this picture window when they got finished. It had to be close to the top of this house. I think you have to find out exactly what they want to do, but you show support in any way you can.
What I've picked up from skateboarding is something that I think the whole world has never even got a chance to embrace due to certain religious boundaries, racial boundaries, and just a whole lot of BS.
There wasn't too many Cubans, I could say, skateboarding when I started. There wasn't too many ethnicities.
I never really heard any racist type of shit on the skateboard. Like, I never heard like, you fucking nigger from a white skater to a black skater, or you fucking stupid white boy. Like, I never heard that shit before. We were segregated within our own ethnic community. Like, you're a black dude, you're riding a skateboard with the white kids, get off that white boy shit.
You think you white?
Why you doing such a white boy sport?
Oh, you doing that white boy shit, like that's a no-no right there.
I was sitting on the couch and I saw a commercial and there was a kid with a skateboard and I was like, whoa, I want a skateboard. And I held an image of having a skateboard. And I asked my father, like, Dad, can I have a skateboard? And he was like, nah, man, that's not for you, that's for white kids.
And you can't let that peer pressure burn you up because it will eat you alive.
I never really thought of any friction at the skate parks between the different kids or the different races or whatever, because each skate park was in its own place in terms of what sort of community it was around it. I live in San Diego, so it's pretty white.
There wasn't that many skateboarders in my school, but you could see the diversity and the segregation, you know.
All the Chinese kids would hang out together, the Filipinos all hung out together, the white kids hung out together, the black kids all hung out together, and the skaters were all mixed races all hanging out together.
You can be any color you want, and skaters are down with you, but if you don't skate, we hate you.
For me, skateboarding broke every racial and cultural and even socioeconomic, barrier that I could ever foresee, and it opened a world to me that included every race.
This video is for all those fake ass bullshit skateboarders coming through, talking about representing New York, ain't know where Malali's is, don't know where the banks are. He has a dream. Never heard of Benji's in the project. Ain't hear about no shut. Y'all don't know what shut is. Suck my dick, yo.
As skateboarding continued to grow in popularity, especially on the West Coast, a group of New York skaters, led by Rodney Smith, decided to start their own team. Frustrated with the lack of East Coast hip-hop-driven representation, Shut was formed and driven to represent a whole new identity in skateboarding.
I feel Shut Skateboarders is important to the history of skating because they are the hip-hop element, and they created that.
Turning point in New York City was like when the Shut crew pretty much they were like the shit.
When you saw them together, you know they were just like some crazy ass dudes, They were young, they were drinking, they were wilding out, they were having fun.
If I didn't ride for Powell, I'd ride for Shut, Just because they were so cool, what they were doing was so cool, and I had, the sort of the like-mindedness, the whole hip-hop and graffiti and all that stuff and what was going down in the music and stuff like that.
While the West Coast primarily vert-oriented skateboarding dominated the scene, the Shut team was skating New York City's raw urban landscape. Due to the conditions of the streets, New York skaters required an entirely different design of skateboard, one that could withstand a variety of conditions that the city streets presented.
Rod was always like tinkering with stuff and making boards and stuff, so it wasn't really very surprising for me. It was just kind of like a natural progression.
Unfortunately, we were so frustrated with the lack of quality within the boards, we thought there had to be a better way.
Bought a bunch of blanks, and we took them up on my roof, and we used like milk crates and my mom's jigsaw, and we traced all these shapes, and each of us basically had our own shape.
So we head over to Ollie's house. He says, hey, I got a jigsaw, and we'll come up with some shapes, and let's see what happens.
You know, basically we all just create our dream shapes. You know, necessity is the mother of invention.
And we start cutting.
Wow, I really like the Dogtown web, and I really like the Nodus board, so I'm gonna make a pointy web with a Rob Roscop tail.
We still couldn't figure out why these uncut boards that we purchased and made our own shapes were better than professional boards sold in the skateboarding shops. But at that point, we didn't care. We just knew that we had a slightly better product and that the boards lasted a little longer, and we still got the same performance or even better performance out of these uncut boards than we did with the professional sold boards.
And then some of them ended up sticking, and you know, when Rod and Bruno turned Shut into a business, you know, they ended up becoming like kind of staple shapes.
Now that Shut had become an official skate team, they went on the road, not only proving their skills to their West Coast competitors, but bringing their unique style to the sport as well.
And I remember seeing these dudes and I was like, what the fuck? Who the hell are these dudes, you know?
It was sort of like hearing about the ill b-boy crew or the ill graffiti crew. It had that same vibe.
You know, you heard all the stories, but was you there?
We would just like take over an entire location, you know? And Sheffy would be like wilding out, and he was this huge buff black dude that would skate with no shirt.
Shut Posse was really, really deep. The core nucleus of it that was actually competing was Barker Barrett, Coco Santiago, Mike Kepper, Mike Kelly.
The boombox and like Sheffy with his crazy hair, and like, you know, everyone was like, dude, the big ass black dudes are here, you know?
It was like they were rich, famous, and fucking touring all over the world, even though it was like a local skate clique that was like ill at skateboarding.
They always had the chicks, they had the beers, they had the crew. They were always in that one spot, and nobody messed with them, and they'd do their little skate thing.
The first experience I had with the Shut guys was at this AM contest in Arizona, and these guys were just killing it. You know, they were skating the rail, they were skating the mini ramp, they were skating the blocks, and then, like, you know, Sheffy was full powerhouse guy, Kepper was there, and I was just like, this is the East Coast.
Well, what's up, nigga?
But at the time, it was just like, we were just this big clique of like ethnic, urban kids, city kids, product of our own environment. We were like an athletic gear, jeans, sweatpants. You know, it wasn't that staple skateboard outfit.
They just seemed like a street gang.
They're just grimy. I loved it.
With the growth of hip-hop and the advent of street skating, even the West Coast vert skaters began to see a cultural shift.
The winds were changing downtown for sure, and not just in skateboarding and not just in hip-hop. There seemed to be somewhat of a cultural shift going on.
I think back then, skateboarding was, in the street instance of it, was still coming up. Vert was just getting ready to die.
When hip-hop started, skateboarding was kind of, in the 1980s, was coming down off of its huge swing of being a gigantic skate park-based skateboard madness, Tony Alva, that whole Dogtown scene and all that like superstarism that was going on, and it sort of like retired to backyard ramps, kind of like still trying to find itself.
The street skating, you know, took off probably when the skate parks started closing down, you know, as just a necessary outlet.
And I remember the day that Thrasher magazine, I went over there and they showed me the cover that said Vert was dead. I was like, you guys are just gonna kill it like that? It's insane.
Everywhere was like, oh, I don't need to build a huge wooden U in my backyard, you know?
You had these companies, Vision, Powell Peralta, Santa Cruz, who basically operated the whole structure of their company around the ramp god, the Tony Hawk, the Christian Hosoi, the Gator, you know? But were basically earning all their dough and getting all their heat from the small but growing street skater populace.
Suddenly the world was a skate park. You know, your driveway, your street, everything around you could be skated on, and the skate parks were closing at a breakneck pace. You know, no skate park could have, they couldn't afford liability insurance. They were all in random locations that people didn't have access to. Nobody wanted to get pads, you know, they just wanted to go skate, and all of a sudden, guys like Tommy and Nadas showed up, and it was like, you can ride a handrail. Are you kidding me?
With the death of the vert gods and closing of all skate parks, the skate industry collapsed into near bankruptcy. In a desperate attempt to save themselves, the major skate companies began to grab for anything to keep them afloat. And that thing was street skating.
The whole Shut thing, which was like all of the New York City skateboarders trying to like make their little company, had the exact same story from the Dogtown Z-Boys story. All these guys, they got so famous and they were just destroying shit, the California skateboard companies just completely stole all the skaters and the company went out of business.
During this period, on the West Coast, a growing movement of street skaters began a changing of the guard in San Francisco.
Embarcadero it's an area of San Francisco down by the waterfront. And it was dubbed EMB, was its nickname.
Before it got famous, it was just this nice little community of just skaters, just dudes kind of not really partying, but just living.
You would have like this big conflict between the skaters and all of these business people that bring in a lot of tax dollars and money to the city.
People down there smoking blunts and smoking weed, and then just 40s out skating around with 40s and stuff. Dudes skating around with their shirts off.
The beginning of the Embarcadero era, like Thrasher magazine and Transworld never shot photos of us.
Kind of looked down upon by all the people in the magazines, like Thrasher magazine and all that. They used to hate on us.
They were more still kind of like, in a sense, like the earlier generation of street skating, which was kind of like more of the gnarly side, more of like the you bomb hills and kind of the gnarl side, as opposed to like this kind of like more technical type of skateboarding.
And I think the reason why like Thrasher magazine, even if it was in San Francisco, didn't come down was the same reason why the older guys hated on us, because it was the next generation.
Regardless of who tried to stop this new movement, the street influence grew at Embarcadero and flourished in the process.
Embarcadero basically became, in the 90s, it, for various reasons, became the mecca of skateboarding for the whole world.
San Francisco and New York have a lot of similarities to it, and there's a lot of people who come and go between cities quite a bit.
Everyone from the East Coast, we realized, was just like us, because all these guys came down. Harold Hunter, Justin Pierce, Keenan Milton, Stephen Callis. You know, they show up at Embarcadero, gold teeth, skating in Timberlands, you know, puffy jackets, and we're like, wow, these guys are crazy. First time I seen a skater with the gold grill, it was like in '92 or something.
Literally, you had hundreds, if not thousands of kids that were trying to come to San Francisco from all over the world. I mean, there would be days down there when you go down there, there'd be 300 to 500 people down there.
A skater from Virginia Beach who grew up writing graffiti and listening to hip-hop saw the potential of street culture and skateboarding pioneered by Shut. Using his position as a professional skateboarder, he took this idea to the next level.
Underworld Element wasn't about skateboards as much as it was about a lifestyle and everything that was involved in that.
Andy Howell could have been from New York City.
The videos were such a powerful tool in skateboarding at that time. I could put, you know, songs I made with Lil Jon on my video part and combine it with whatever other outtakes of, like, you know, studio or writing graffiti or my artwork in the house or whatever. And I started to paint a picture of a lifestyle to every kid out there that didn't really get a chance to see that.
We went and sponsored Harold Hunter and Jeff Pang and like a lot of the hot New York kids who were on the come up.
I just went back to when I was 14 years old, and I wanted to know what Tony Hawk and Caballero and those guys did when they weren't riding skateboards. You know, I was interested in what their lives were like as much as I was interested in what tricks they did at the time, you know. And that drove me creatively throughout my whole career as being involved in skateboarding.
At the same time, a young black skater from New York City moved to the West Coast and began turning heads with his unique style and skills.
One of my biggest influences, like coming up in skateboarding, was Cream Campbell. Not only was he a black skater, but he brought his community into our community through the advertisement, through his videos. You really got the first urban feel in skateboarding from Cream.
He brought his whole ethnicity, his whole background into it.
He's as real as it gets when you talk about like street and hood and stuff.
Of course, there have been plenty of black skaters in the past, but no one that I thought stood out so much in the way that Cream did, that was really taking a new direction.
When he was at his peak, he definitely was like one of the big pros in skateboarding, just as a personality.
Kareem was as big as it gets.
He didn't blow up because he was black, he blew up because his talent and his style was so fucking nasty that motherfuckers you had to recognize.
He's just like, you know, a skateboarder OG.
He set a crazy foundation. Because them was the dudes who just like, was fighting for it to be cool before me. You know what I mean? Like they was the ones grinding it out. When it wasn't accepted in our community, it was the ones who was doing all the foundation. I didn't do nothing but just set a house on it.
He just came on the scene and killed it. He was totally this fresh young face and just a ripper. And his style was so smooth and he was so good that he just blew everybody away. And the fact that he happened to be black, he happened to be black.
In 1993, Rodney Smith, Eli Morgan Gessner, and their friend Adam Schatz teamed to form the East Coast's first skateboarding-inspired lifestyle brand, Zoo York.
Zoo York was a major part of like promoting like hip hop with skateboarding, you know, because to me, there's only been a couple brands in the history of skateboarding that have been hip hop brands.
We raised a very small amount of money from friends and family.
Rodney did shut skates in New York City for a long time, and then finally after working we got money and got investors and, you know, trying to do our thing on the East Coast.
A lot of positive things was happening. A lot of things were coming out of skateboarding. We were starting to reap the benefits of that hard labor.
Zoo was already in motion, like the fucking coals were being put in Zoo's fucking steam engine.
Eli and I continued working at our day jobs and doing it essentially as a moonlight, which we did for a couple of years.
All the money we make goes right back into developing and furthering the company. So we're gonna just like keep expanding because we just started and we have like such a huge demand for our stuff and we're really small and don't have any other company backing us. So it's really tough for us to keep like coming out with new product all the time, and that's just all we're doing. It's like a mad scramble.
Rodney was like, yeah, I'm trying to kickstart this Zoo York thing. It's gonna be Ill Kid, Ivo's gonna hit it. I was like, all right, cool, yeah, that's dope. It's like, you gonna get down, right? I was like, yeah, all right, I'll be down.
Who's on the team?
Who's on the team?
Yeah. Ricky Oyola, Jeff Pang, Ryan Hickey, Bobby Pulio, Mike Hernandez, myself, Robbie Gangemi, Frank Natanelli, and Jamie Story. True, East Coast doing our thing, you know. I mean, like,
wait, what's up?
How's Fluto, you know what I'm saying?
How flow?
How's Flow? Oh, how hunter right there.
Why?
Everybody say Zoo York! Zoo York! Zoo York! Zoo York!
That was the real deal. They were skating in New York, they were skating in Brooklyn. You know, people couldn't touch that in California.
The creator of Zoo had hip hop backgrounds, you know, what came across in the company from graffiti to the association with the riders.
Late 90s at Zoo York, we started to get involved with various media projects.
Zoo York, hands down, has one of the greatest videos ever created in skateboarding history.
The whole basis of it was to do what we did from the beginning, which was to represent New York City street culture.
Eli single-handedly taped every dope hip-hop song ever before they became the dopest hip-hop song ever.
In some of the early videos that we put out, we incorporated live hip-hop performances and DJ performances in our skateboard videos.
Bobbito and I, you had this radio show. It was just sort of a week-to-week thing we were thrilled to be doing.
Method Man, Ghostface, Diamond D, Busta Rhymes.
I never had that trick in my life.
The chemistry was great. We all had great communication, and we all looked at Zoo York as much more than a company or a job or a place.
In New York, whether you want to or not, you're gonna have hip hop influences. Whether you're the punkest kid walking down the street or not, like, you know, if you're from New York, you have that in you.
Anytime you looked at an ad, you always knew it was New York. It was like, there was no doubt that that's where it was from, and that's, you know, where these ads were being taken at.
shout on the East Coast.
I think that it helped really push the image onto people and had it stick.
In the mid-90s, Chad Muska would enter the skateboard scene. With a unique style both on and off his board heavily influenced by urban culture, Muska would help redefine what skateboarding was to be.
In the mid-90s when I first was coming up, I was this white kid showing up, you know, wearing jerseys and rolled up swooshy pants and a ghetto blaster and, you know, making beats and all this shit I was doing, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Nah, I'm saying word up. I'm on this motherfucker right now with my man Chad. Best time that I ever had, you know what I'm saying? From the head to the feet, motherfucker Muska beat.
Muska beats, coming through with them.
I met like my homeboy Chad Muska, you know what I mean? He's like a professional skater, he get paid crazy money, you know what I mean? Chad actually did a rap album.
Muska is hip hop, as far as I'm concerned. I listened to his album, I heard Africa Bambaataa on it. Oh, KRS is on it. Oh, Kaz, Wu-Tang, oh.
Chad would then go on to produce Muska Beats, a self-financed hip-hop album.
We got the portable studio together, set it up in the hotel, and everybody just came through and laid their tracks right there.
From hip-hop being a part of my life this whole time, I was always DJing and all that stuff, and I started making beats.
I didn't try to just grab anybody out there that was a rapper, you know? I tried to grab people that, to me, made a major influence on hip-hop culture and music.
Basically, my whole goal with this project is to take the people that inspired me growing up and introduce them to the skateboard community.
Muska was ahead of his time. If he would have did that shit now, oh, it'd be a rap. But Muska was just so far ahead of his time. Man, I even told Muska, I said, man, if you would have did that shit now, ooh.
As hip-hop and skateboarding both reached mainstream popularity, a small club in Manhattan began showcasing these two very unique art forms together.